All right, so 3 categories that we're going to hone in on and focus for our time together during this snapshot. First, we know that the evidence shows us that students that are actively engaged are more likely to meet learning outcomes. There is content in Teaching in Nursing, Billings, and Halstead. That is the resource we're using for this snapshot. It is actually in chapter 16. We always use the most current edition, which is 6th edition, and it starts on page 286. So we want to support student success, and active engagement with our students is one critical component as we support them to meet their learning outcomes. Second, taking a look at Astin's theory of student involvement. This is synonymous with active engagement. There are 5 concepts that we're going to cover during our time together today. And then third, students that have frequent interaction with faculty are more satisfied with their learning experience. So we must invest in the time to actively engage our students in the learning setting, whatever that is, whether it's the clinical setting, the lab setting, or SIM, or the classroom setting. It's important that we actively engage our students in order for them to be successful. Next, let's take a look at those 5 basic elements based on Astin's theory of student involvement. So first, involvement and engagement refer to the investment to physical and psychological energy in learning. We know that energy matters. Oftentimes we can feel the energy when we walk into the classroom. Students feel our energy the same way. So we want to spend the time preparing for class. We should be doing lesson plans, whether it's the old-fashioned way where you write out your objectives and you ensure that you're including content that's aligned with each of those objectives, or if you want to pull some current literature in addition to the text reading assignments that students, textbook reading assignments that students may have. So whatever that looks like for you as an educator, the most important component is that we bring the physical energy, so ensuring that we are sleeping well, that we are well prepared, and that we are confident in the content that we're sharing. And that's the psychological energy as well. Taking the time to connect with our students. Now, it doesn't mean that we take on their burdens or their problems, but we should be a resource for our students by connecting in a supportive, collaborative, student-faculty way. All right, let's take a look at the second element that we want to touch on. Involvement and engagement occur along a continuum with different degrees of involvement at varying times. We know that when we use a flipped classroom designed for our student learning atmosphere and environment, that it does require the student to do quite a bit of pre-work, as well as us as the educator. So that's just one example when we think about the continuum with different degrees of involvement. That type of learning experience is going to require a lot of pre-work for the student to complete. So they're going to have to spend quite a bit of time outside of the classroom learning and really thinking through some of those concepts, because the goal with flipped classroom is that students bring in questions and are really ready to fully engage and actively learn from each other, as well as to share their experiences related to that topic. So it depends on the type of learning experience that we plan for our students. It may look different in the classroom that given day, or in the lab, or in clinical. We just want to make sure that as students, especially as it relates to our nursing students, that we are moving throughout the continuum of learning. For level 1, we know those foundational skills are really important. So we want to make sure we are able to actively engage students in a way that's going to allow them to, yes, understand at that lowest level of Bloom's taxonomy, remembering content, all the way up to them applying those clinical skills in the clinical setting as well as in the lab setting. But it's a continuation of learning that happens over time. We want to be able to support that. Third, involvement and engagement have both quantitative, such as hours studying, and qualitative aspects, such as the measurement of comprehension. That's pretty self-explanatory, but we want to make sure that we are actively engaging our students through evaluation from a summative perspective, as well as a formative perspective, and that we are giving ongoing feedback to our students throughout their learning experience. Fourth, the amount of time of student learning is directly influenced by the quality and quantity of student involvement and engagement. And then finally, effectiveness of education is directly related to increasing students' involvement and engagement in the learning process. Flipped classroom is another great example of how students have to actively engage in order to participate in the group learning experience that they will have once they come into the classroom. All right, so I know that that was a very high-level overview of those 5 basic elements. And the last part we're going to wrap up with is related to student engagement. So taking a look at the principles of good practice in undergraduate education, Chickering and Gamson focuses on 7 of those. And then also reviewing the content again in teaching and nursing, chapter 16, it starts on page 286. I actually have it open. And looking at the research findings from NSSE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement, they talk about the evidence for the effect of engagement on student learning, which we have gone over some of those